Hi, I'm Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Thank you for joining me for this IPA talk, and with me I've got IPA Government Public Relations Director Allison Maley, as well as Deputy Executive Director General Counsel Brian Schwartz. So hi guys.
Hi.
Good afternoon. How are we doing?
It's been a while since we've done this in person.
I think it has been probably a couple of years now since we've done it.
Yeah.
So today's date's August 22nd. Got a lot of schools that started session. I think CPS actually got going here even today.
Yep.
Most schools across the state are back in. Got some ground to cover here, probably some important reminders and things people ought to be keeping in mind as we get started with the school year. But let's get to some real critical business off the start, and that is the fact that the Cardinals are in fact have about a 17-point game lead over the Cubs. I think as of today, right, Brian?
There's still sufficient time. Maybe not this year, but
also sufficient time for Albert to get to 700.
That's what we need.
So that's where I'm shooting for.
Got exciting after this weekend.
Seven left, 7 more.
Yeah, with the Grand Slam last week and then the 2 homers, on Saturday. That was great. But we digress. So let's get into it. We've got a lot of schools that are still out there looking for teachers, Allison. I was doing an interview with CPS Chicago last week on this issue and some other things, and as part of that, I just checked out the IASA Job Bank to get a kind of an idea of what we were dealing with statewide. And knowing that the majority of vacancies end up there, I did the filter and just honed in on instructional staff, and there were still 2,000 plus positions open just for what appeared to be teachers. Mm-hmm. So we do know, though, that there's been some work done legislatively to try to provide a little bit of relief. So could you just talk with us a little bit about that and what maybe school districts need to make sure that they keep front of mind when they're trying to find teachers?
Yeah, I mean, mostly I'd say it's in the realm of substitute teachers. So the legislature had passed legislation last year to allow for retirees to work longer. Now that expired July 1, so that's not effective for this school year. However, there was legislation to allow subs to work for the same teacher for 120 days instead of 90 days through this school year, the 2022-2023 school year. Also, as of January 1, it would also allow individuals who are enrolled in an ed prep program that have 90 credit hours to apply for a sub license, not a short-term license that you would normally need a full bachelor's degree for. But this would allow folks that are in the process of getting their education degree to then sub and kind of get that real-world experience and hopefully help out a school district as well. So that's not effective until January, but hopefully once that comes into play, that will help out in the spring, assuming that there are still some shortages out there. So that's probably the biggest 2 things related to substitute teachers. So there was also legislation to allow short-term subs to work for 15 consecutive days instead of 5 during a public health emergency like we experienced during COVID. If we were ever to experience something like that, or those public health emergencies were extended, that would apply for that as well. So,
do you see anything in veto session to address the teacher or sub shortage?
I could see another extension of the allowing retirees possibly, because that did expire July 1. The other thing I could see is if there were legislation to extend the ability to have short-term subs, because that also expires in this school year, at the end of this school year. So that ability to have people that don't have bachelor's degrees work in a school on a short-term basis will expire. So we'll see if that gets extended.
So obviously still a lot of work to do on the full-time teacher route, sub. We need help with both of those. Obviously, we need more people to be available, because I know, as we know in the meetings that we held with members this last year, if we asked the question, hey, who's out there been subbing in classrooms this last week, typically it was over half, easy, maybe closer to 75%. We're having to spend some time in the classrooms due to not having enough subs. So a lot more to come with that. Another issue that seems to be pretty recurring on an annual basis, Allison, is updates to curricular requirements that schools have to contend with. So what are we looking at for 22-23 that people just need to be sure to remember?
Sure. So if you remember from the last couple of years, and the dates are escaping me when these actually became law, but we will have Asian American History unit of instruction in history this coming school year, a unit of media literacy as well, and then allowing for computer literacy for this school year also. Down the road, we're looking at requiring or allowing students to have access to a computer science class next school year. The following school year, 24-25, to have 2 years of laboratory science instead of just science that was in the statute previously. And then, of course, in 28-29 school year, requiring high school graduates to have 2 years of foreign language, which would include American Sign Language plus or whatever language is offered at that high school level.
Yeah, and I know, just speaking from my experience as a high school principal, that's probably the one that might give the most heartburn, just as we look at CTE courses and kids that are looking for a non-college track and what that could mean. So I'm anticipating the reach out for further discussions with members of the General Assembly and the State Board to kind of talk that through and see where maybe some more allowances could be made, like some states that are allowing for computer programming to count as a foreign language possibility. So just one example of some things that we maybe need to be looking at with that as we move forward.
And there's already legislation filed to massage some of the foreign language requirements as well, kind of peel that back and kind of go back to what we've been doing, just to allow more flexibility for students to take other classes that they may be interested in.
Yep, absolutely. Very good. All right, Brian, let's pivot to you on a few different things here. I'd be remiss not to talk a little bit about student safety. As we dealt with things there at the end of the last school year in Texas and all of that, can you talk to us a little bit about what we need to make sure we're doing with regards to lockdowns and all of that?
Sure. Well, there's new legislation, Public Act 102-395, that changes the school lockdown drill beginning with the 22-23 school year. And that lockdown drill now is going to have to focus on a school shooting incident. Now, what's important is that it can't be an active shooter simulation. We have to provide notice ahead of time, have to make sure that it is age and developmentally appropriate. We can remove kids from that exercise as long as we provide them with other instruction, alternative instruction on school lockdown and school shooter simulation.
Just in case parents are not wanting their children to
Correct.
participate as part of that.
Parents have the option of excluding their kids,
Yep.
or the teacher, if she doesn't believe or he doesn't believe the child is emotionally mature enough to participate, can also exclude the child.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Now, Allison, you've been involved, with some various conversations with law enforcement and other stakeholder groups with regards to student safety, lockdowns, just threat assessments, all of that. Can you just give us a little bit of insight into the types of conversations that are happening with that right now?
Yeah, I mean, ISB did a virtual listening tour just recently too, with different areas all throughout the state. Several of our members participated in that, just kind of sharing, what they feel is a safe school, like what are the things that go into that, everything down to it being clean, and just, sharing with families and being welcoming to families and members of the community, and at the same time balancing that with security measures also. So that was a really good conversation. I sat in on one of them. It was a really good conversation, I thought. And so I know ISB is collecting that information, and maybe hopefully we'll share out with the field, some tips or ideas for what those things might look like for the coming school year and on forward. Otherwise, there are several management groups and the unions that are participating in some just sort of more informal conversations with the Sheriff's Association and the Illinois Chiefs of Police, just about, what kind of information can we share with the field that maybe people just aren't aware of, or, just reminders of things like filling out the clear and present danger form that the state police requires. So if there's a person in the community or a parent or whomever that a school has contact with that they feel is a clear and present danger to themselves or others, principals specifically need to report that to the state police. So I know we've shared that form with our folks on Connect before. Happy to do that again, but that's just kind of those things that we want to help keep reminding the field that they have access to if they need it, and then just kind of, what are best practices really for school safety, whether it's threat assessment, hardening of facilities, or just, making sure that the community and the school is a welcoming environment, and making sure that everyone is supported while they're there. So
let me just, I guess, as a reminder for everybody, and I welcome both of you to interject here if I miss anything with regards to this, but where threat assessments are concerned, it's important that school districts get their crisis management teams together, that they be meeting, that they make sure that they have their threat assessment plans put together, that those things are given to the state board and the various
Regional
people that need to.
offices.
There we go, the regional offices of education. Anything else, just we may need to make sure that we cover with regards to where school safety is concerned for school districts right now.
Well, just a reminder, one of the new requirements that went into effect last year requires that if a school issues identification cards to kids, on the back of the identification card has to be the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and the Crisis Text Line. And if the school doesn't issue ID cards, that information needs to be on the school's website. And I worry about that for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're talking about kiddo safety, and we want to make sure they have access to that information. But if a child were to injure themselves, the first question that's going to be asked by the family's attorney is whether or not that information was available. So very important to get that information on the back of ID cards. If you printed your ID cards and you haven't placed that information on the ID card, put a sticker on the back of the card and call it good, but just making sure that we get that information in the hands of kids.
Brian, the new 988 number, can that be added as that? Will that satisfy that statute or no?
Sure, that's a good question, Allison. So the legislation speaks specifically to those two phone numbers, but certainly that information could also be included on the ID card as well.
So a question I've got, because this is an issue that schools occasionally deal with, what type of responsibility do school districts have, school leaders in particular have, to be communicating with parents if they are hearing from a child a credible threat, particularly where they're harming themselves, and we're talking about suicide, but even more broadly, it could be harming others. But in the case of suicide here, what type of responsibility do school districts have to be talking with parents?
So Allison talked about the clear and present danger reporting form if the child is at risk of hurting themselves or others. But I think access to school counselors, any kind of support that we can provide for the kiddo at school, but communication with the parent, absolutely. Parent or guardian is critical.
Well, I think that should always be the default, right, is to err on that side. I know sometimes there's concerns about what's going on at home or whatever, but I think in these cases it's really important to err on that side of making sure that parents are fully in the loop with all of that. So Brian, we've had some other bills that have been passed and other statutes that people need to be just mindful of: uniforms, the modifications there, hairstyles. I know, Allison, you did an IPA talk this last year with the mother of Jett Hawkins and the law with regards to that, but what are some things that school districts need to be sure that they're mindful of?
Sure, and that was a great interview. So one of the things that's very important to this General Assembly is social justice. And the one act that you just referenced, the Jett Hawkins Act, provides that schools can't prohibit hairstyles that are historically associated with race, ethnicity, or hair texture. And you wouldn't believe that this would be a problem in 2022. But if you Google student discipline and hairstyle, you will find just a litany of hits from all over the country. Vast majority of those being kids of color. So it is important. The other social justice bill deals with athletic and PE uniforms, making sure that kids can modify those uniforms for privacy or for religious reasons. So I think we'll see more social justice initiatives out of the General Assembly, maybe not in veto, but in the spring session as well.
Yeah, you bet. Well, so quite a bit of ground covered here in a relatively few short minutes, so I appreciate both of you and your time. Of course, we encourage people to reach out to any one of us if there are issues. A couple of highlights that I wanted to remind individuals as you look at other services and supports that are available. Two things quickly come to mind. One is the Model Student Handbook. We've got it on the brand new IPA website. It looks super sharp and great to navigate, easy to get around. Thank Dave Heinzel for his work with that. But Brian, the most recent update actually came quite a bit early this year because General Assembly wrapped up in April for spring session, which is a rarity. But I think we're all caught up and people can find what they need to there right now.
We are. So the Model Student Handbook has 17 changes for the 2021-23 school year, which is quite a bit, relatively speaking, looking back in the past. And then also, Allison and I will have our legislative and case law update a little bit earlier this year. So look for that in Probably October.
October, yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And the last thing that I'll remind everyone is IPA Plugged In is coming back. We're going to start on September 7th, where we'll invite members to come together and hear updates. And we're actually going to modify the title just a little bit this year in the way that we approach IPA Plugged In. It's actually going to be IPA Plugged In and Breaking Out. And the reason for that is every other month we're going to have an alternate between hearing from IPA members of the team and other key bits of information that are important. And then the following month we're going to want to hear from you and survey you for your ideas and topics that you would like to discuss with your colleagues from throughout the state. And then we'll be breaking out into grade level groups and give you an opportunity to communicate with each other through facilitated conversations. So excited about that this upcoming year. So we're bringing a couple of things together into this new format of IPA Plugged In and Breaking Out, and we'll get that information out to you very soon. All right. So Allison, Brian, thanks. Appreciate that. Go Cards. My name is Jason Leahy, Executive Director of IPA. If there's anything that the association can do for you, don't hesitate to give us a call or check us out on the web at www.ilprinciples.org. Take care.